Okay, we're getting ready to start, guys. Go ahead. Go ahead, start. Say when. All right, I promised you that we're going to talk one more time about symbolisms before we get into the text, and that's what we're going to do today. I think I'm going to be able to finish this up. I've got it written in such a way that we should be able to get through it. Last time we discussed symbolisms and how they can be used to enhance the meaning of a story or a movie. And I'd like to do a little bit more of that today. When I was in junior high school, we lived for a short time in downtown Clio. My dad was having a new house built, the one on Genesee Road where we lived for quite a while, and the old one had already sold. So we lived in an apartment for about 9 months. It was adjacent to the bar, which was itself adjacent to the railroad tracks. So one of the downsides was the train would blow its whistle about midnight and wake us up, and then the drunks would get out of the bar about 2 o'clock in the morning and wake us up again. But there were perks in living in a town, small town like that. For one, we could walk everywhere, to school, to the donut shop, and there happened to be a little movie theater downtown Clio at that point, and it was right across the street from where the apartment was. So occasionally my brother and I would take my sister to see whatever happened to be on. And one day we noticed that there was this movie that was on, and it was kind of about animals in flight, we thought. So off the three of us went. And halfway through the movie, I looked at my brother, and he was intensely staring at the big screen as though he was soaking it all in. But when I looked at my little sister, her face was kind of disturbed and looked horrified. It looked like she was almost starting to cry. When I went home, I found out I was in trouble. And although that was not unusual, this time I was not sure why. Yeah, my sister was only in the 3rd grade, but Mom, we only went to see a movie. I got to get it back. I missed my punchline now. It's not coming.
Did you turn it on?
It just blue beeped at me. Well, I've been hitting the birds. We had gone to see the birds. My mom eventually convinced me that The Birds was not actually a nature film. So what was it about? What was it about? Sometimes an author or a playwright does not reveal what the meaning of their movie or their play or their book is actually about. And if they don't, if we're not sure, where can we go? Well, it happens that the entertainment industry happens to have people for that. And here are a couple of critics' opinions of the deep underlying message of The Birds. First of all, The Birds is a political allegory about the psychological violence of capitalism and the fear-mongering of the Cold War. Fear of nuclear attack is apparent when the birds cover the bay like a white cloud, suggestive of a nuclear mushroom cloud. Okay? Here's the Freudian interpretation. It's clean, okay? The Birds refers to the female characters in Mitch's life. He's one of the main characters. The women all have a relationship with Mitch that is interrupted when Melanie arrives. His mother, his ex, and even his little sister. Each woman flocks around Mitch until Melanie shows up and, like an object tossed into the flock of birds, causes them to despair. Angry and frustrated, Melanie's presence, the physical bird attacks are the manifestation of this rage. Two very different interpretations given by people that did not write the film. Okay. I read once that Alfred Hitchcock himself said that it was his idea of what Judgment Day would be like. If I had to choose, I'd probably go with the author's interpretation, not somebody else's. Why birds? Whatever the interpretation, why birds? Why were they used? Different kinds of birds are used to represent different kinds of things. For instance, the raven. Edgar Allan Poe did not use a robin for a reason. Ravens are dark and mysterious. In the TV program called The Vikings, which is the picture on the right there is a raven that shows up periodically throughout the series. If you are paying attention while watching, you understand that this raven is a symbol of war and represents the eyes and ears of the chief Viking god Odin. Likewise, at the end of the book, at the end of the story of the flood, what do we see? We see two birds. We see a raven and a dove. And it would seem, at least, that the Bible, even in the Bible, symbols are not used accidentally. Like with Alfred Hitchcock's the movie The Birds, if an author does not let you know explicitly what a symbol stands for, then some people's imaginations will run wild and meanings are put forth that the author never intended. For instance, here's another example. Many people thought that when John Lennon was secretly, or was writing the song Lucy in the Sky and Diamonds, he was secretly talking about LSD, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I remember when that controversy went on. But when pressed, Lennon said that the song was simply about a picture that his son wrote, or his son drew. The drawing had diamonds in it, and that's what he wrote it about. In our postmodern world, too many believe that the meaning of something resides in the reader, in the receiver, if you will. In other words, every person can get their own meaning from what is written. But I believe that the author is what determines meaning. Meaning is conveyed by the author. You may not know what the writer intended sometimes, but that does not mean that you should make up your own meaning to fit your own narrative. This is important because this is something that happens all too often in the modern world. And it happens in Revelation. With any kind of music or film or literature, including the Bible, the meaning of the author's symbols are not to be decided by the one who hears, sees, or reads. Instead, the meaning of the symbols must be communicated by the one who writes. A good author develops symbols throughout and attempts to make it plain to those who are paying attention what those symbols are standing for. And I believe the Bible does that very well. Here's some other symbols that we could take a look at. Animals can always be symbols, and each conjures up a very different connotation. meanings other than just I'm an animal, here I am. There is a reason why, for instance, that the Lion King is not a hippo. Okay? It's a symbol. It's not just a lion, it's a symbol. And Harry Potter's bird, Hedwig, could not have been an eagle or a hummingbird. It was an owl for a reason. The role was given to Hedwig the owl because of the nature of the owl. Can you see symbols, possible symbols in any of these? Sure. All right? We're going to take about 2 seconds on this, but name one of the pictures and tell me what it symbolizes. Anybody, just yell it out. You're getting real good ones, but you're not telling me which one first that you're looking at. Good. Death. Anybody else?
The gold treasure.
Absolutely. Okay? Every one of these can be used as symbols, or they can just be in a movie and be there for no reason at all. So you have to figure out what's what when you are going through. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult, but you guys get the idea. Everything in a book or a movie cannot be a symbolic. That would be confusing and delude any meaning that a symbol might represent. And therefore, the author must carefully pick and choose and then develop what he wants to show. For instance, here's two that could end up maybe being the same symbol, but do they say the same thing? Absolutely not. What about these? They're both crowns.
And there's two different Greek words.
And what about these? Okay? So even two different of the same category symbols can say something totally different depending on the situation and how they're portrayed. We're going to see this in Revelation also. Symbols can convey in a single image what would take a mountain of words to accomplish. Or put another way, the old saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in order to understand what is being conveyed by a symbol, we must somehow understand the symbol's meaning, or what the author intended. Otherwise, the meaning is lost. We use symbols all the time, and sometimes we don't even realize it. We think nothing of it because they're so familiar. Some are very simple and are built into are simply built into our culture. But how do we understand what an author means by a symbol with which we are unfamiliar? In that case, it would be up to the author to define that symbol throughout the course of his writing. And that, I believe, is what God has done throughout the entire Old Testament. And it's going to be important to our study. All right, for a minute here, I want to talk about another kind of symbol that seems unusual and sometimes foreign to people. Math and music were kind of my thing when I was in school. It was the only two classes that I basically passed. I could do math, and I really liked music. Music and math are actually pretty closely related in a lot of senses. I've heard this my whole life, and I think that it's true. For instance, fractions are the basis of musical timing and rhythm. They're not there to calculate anything or to add or subtract or to do a calculus formula. They're simply there as a time signature. And the placement of notes on a scale form a sort of numbering. For instance, the first and the third and the fifth note of any scale form the dominant major chord for that particular key. And then the first, the fourth and the fifth, change that third to a fourth, and what you have is what's called the suspended fourth, or the tension tone in a chord or in a scale, the tension chord that's got to be resolved. If anybody's in here ever played guitar or piano, it's the same as C, F, and G. F is that tension chord. Okay? F7, actually. And F7 is even more. Anyway, this is but one example where numbers are important for other things other than calculations. Numbers are also found in nature everywhere. This happens to be a few examples of where you can find the Fibonacci sequence in both nature and in art. Contrary to what we've been taught, computation is not the only reason why numbers exist. Many societies, ancient societies, place the emphasis on the symbolic use of numbers. Historically, one stands out kind of more than others, and it's in the ancient Greeks, where we have a guy named Pythagoras. The guy that said a squared plus b squared equals c squared. He had a secret society known as the Pythagoreans. Pythagoras himself once said that everything is arranged according to number and mathematical shapes. Nobody in here that was in my classes in school, I had that one of the sayings up on my wall. That was one of them I had. But the Pythagoreans saw numbers as important in and of themselves. They viewed them as being significant other than just for computation. In fact, certain numbers were given certain attributes. So one was the number of unity. Now this is for the Greeks. And the number of reason. 2, diversity and opinion. And it was the first female number. I always wondered whether or not that opinion and female kind of went, I don't know, maybe not. 3 was the number of harmony, unity and diversity, and was the first male number. 4 was the number of justice and retribution. And 6 was the creation number, male plus female plus one more. Often, as a result, the Greeks found interesting geometric and mathematical reasons to see certain numbers as having mysterious qualities. Even today, we use some numbers as symbols with meanings other than their own. Here's a couple of easy ones. Okay, that 7 doesn't mean anything in this particular situation that would have anything to do with computation. It just happens to be a lucky number. And 13 is unlucky. I don't know where 13 being unlucky came from. I didn't look it up. We could probably find out. But I know that in Italy, it's the opposite. 13 is actually a lucky number. But where did 7 become a lucky number? Anybody know? Yeah, but why? Because if you're rolling dice, it's the most possibilities you have in a set of dice when you roll it is to get a 7. You can get a 1 and a 6, you can get a 2 and a 5, you can get a 3 and a 4, and the other side of the dice, if they flip the other way, you can get those same combinations. So you have 6 possibilities, which is the best possibility. Most of you don't even know that. You just think it's a lucky number. All right? See how that gets ingrained into us and we don't even realize it? So there are some other numbers that are actually significant to us and we don't really think about it that much. But see if you can put your thinking caps on and see what these particular numbers are. I didn't tell you, did I? But you know that simply from the culture. We've got the Goldilocks and the 3 bears and the 3 blind mice and the 3 musketeers. There has to be a reason why that's important. But they are. We don't see other numbers used in this situation. We see 3 used in these kinds of situations. Even when we get to art, whether it's photography or painting or whatever, the rule of thirds is important. Placement on a 2-dimensional sheet is done. One of the rules that's used is that they take and divide it up into 3 parts, like a tic-tac-toe board, and as Sam can contest, or can tell us for sure, probably even better than I can. Placement on either one of those lines or one of those crossing points is the most pleasing place you can put your subject. Okay? Here's another one. We got sevens. Sevens are important in our society. We got 7 wonders of the world, 7 dwarfs. We've got 7 brides for 7 brothers, 7-year itch. If you break a mirror, you are unlucky for... I never figured out how 7 can be a lucky number, and then when you break a mirror, yeah, whatever. But you get the idea. There's a whole lot of these in here. 7 seems to be the number of perfection or security or safety in some ways. And we use it all the time in movies and in films and in books and all kinds of stuff. Do you think that numbers used as symbols are chosen at random or are accidental? Or is there a reason why some numbers become significant? We've already seen a little bit that the Greeks kind of had this idea, and probably other ancient cultures that we're not aware of. When we read the Bible, we see that when the Bible itself uses numbers for calculation, they're accurate to a fault. But when numbers are used in the Bible for something other than calculation, they have an important meaning attached to them. There is always a purpose when the Bible uses numbers as symbols. And as a result, their use is worth investigating. I think it is notable that many of the same significant numbers that we use today, or the ancient people in Greek or anybody else used, are the same ones that are used in the Bible and have special meanings attached to them. This fact alone should make us wonder which came first, the chicken or the egg. I've pondered that myself. I know that you guys probably think I'm crazy for it, but I have. Did the Greeks or us or any other culture figure out on their own what some numbers should have significance, or did something or someone else direct and nudge our thinking in that direction? Keep in mind that many people have tried to give meanings to numbers used in the Bible in ways that are not true. We must be cautious. Remember that if a symbol is going to be used and have an impact, not everything can be considered a symbol. And most symbols, including symbolic numbers, are defined by the author. Here's a list of the main symbolic numbers found in the Bible. 3. And I'm not going to read down through this entire list, but we'll mention a few of them. But I think some of you have heard this part of it before from me, and this shouldn't be totally like, wow, I never heard of that before. But when you think of 3, you think of blessed, divine, perfection, completeness. That's the basic definition of the number 3 as it's used in the Bible. Now, there's no place in the Bible that says, whenever you see the number 3, you're going to think blessed, you're going to think divine perfection, or you're going to think completeness. It's not there. There's no definition. But it's developed as we go through, because we see holy, holy, holy. We see the Trinity. We see a giant fish that Jonah was swallowed into for 3 days, and that someone else was 3 days in a tomb. And Abraham, in his covenant, involved the sacrifice of 3 animals, and each were 3 years old. And Joseph, when he interpreted the dreams, he interpreted them for 3 people. And the butler's dream had 3 branches, and the baker's 3. You get the idea that if you use these same numbers in the same context over and over and over again, the author is defining what those stand for. Another one is 4. World, creation, earth, north, south, east, and west. 4 cherubim guarding the tree of life. We're going to see in Revelation that 4 is going to be used specifically, and it's going to refer back to passages in the Old Testament, such as Daniel, where there's 4 beasts and various things like that. 7, perfection. 7, and its variations, not just 7. Now we're getting into things like 7 and 7 times 7 and 70 times 7 and I think I had another one in there. Yeah, Jubilee, 49 years, 7 times 7. Pentecost, 49 days until the 50th day, which was Pentecost after the Passover, 7 times 7. So sometimes we see multiples of these numbers having the same significance as the number itself, maybe even more so in some ways. And in Revelation, we're going to see a lot of that. So it becomes important. Even even the number of words in a passage such as in passages such as in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, in the original language, we can't do this in the English, are broken down in multiples of 7 words. So we see, and guess what? I had that up here. So last night, I put my lesson on this, and then this morning I changed it on my computer. So there's supposed to be 2 slides here, and you can't see them because they're still on the computer at home. If you take the word counts in several of the word counts in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 in certain sections, you see those show up in multiples of 7 times. 7, 21, 14, 35. Words such as God and it was good and a bunch of those kinds of things. I don't think that's an accident. I think Moses was writing according to a plan, and I think it was put in there for a reason. And as we can see, even Matthew, when he writes his genealogies, if you look at the Gospel of Matthew and you see the genealogies that he wrote, they're written in groups of 7, or 14 actually, 2 times 7. All right? That is important. All right, let's move along. 10. The number of authority or divine order. Not only is it something that in the Old Testament that the people had to tithe, but more importantly, we got the 10 Commandments. Even more important than that, we got 10 generations that are found in Genesis chapter 5 and in Genesis chapter 10. 10 plagues when we get to the New Testament, 10 lepers, etc. And then finally, no, not finally, this is the next to last one. We got 12, which is the number of governmental rule. We got the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles. We've got 12 stones on the breastplate of the priest, 12 loaves, along with fishes, 12 patriarchs that go from Shem all the way through Jacob. We've got the 12,000 cubits and 144 cubit walls in Revelation. And, of course, the 144,000, which we're going to see is 12 times 12,000, or 12 times 12 times 1,000. And now the last one, most important numbers in the Bible, is the judgment number, 40. Reigned for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days. Nineveh was given 40 days to repent. Israel spent 40 years in the wilderness. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness. These numbers are important. They're judgment numbers. They're also important. Some will question this kind of use of numbers and might ask if they are used because God intended it that way, or was it because the many authors of the books collectively, over time, decided that it would fit the storyline of the Bible. And I think that latter one is kind of pretty hard to believe, because we got dozens and dozens of authors, different backgrounds, didn't know each other, written over a 1,400-year period of time. This is not something that happened by accident. So, for whatever reason, out of all of the numbers in the infinite universe, God chose these few numbers to be significant. In the Bible, Genesis starts out immediately using these numbers, 3s and 7s, in very powerful ways. And by the end of Genesis and into Leviticus, we see that the numbers 10, 12, and 40 have already been established as important. And then throughout the entire rest of the Old Testament, as it progresses, these same numbers keep cropping up over and over and over again in various ways, even into the New Testament. I think the evidence clearly points to the fact that some intellect used specific numbers to symbolically convey meaning from the very beginning of time, which makes these numbers worth recognizing. And as a result, man over the centuries also took notice. But that's just my opinion. What we will find in our study of Revelation is that symbols are used over and over again to convey ideas and meanings that can't be conveyed any other way, or it is done this way so that it can use less words, or give us some special meaning that if you're not paying attention, you otherwise wouldn't get. Whatever it is, whether it's the numbers or the beasts or the dragons or the weird animals or the plagues or the nations or anything else, these symbols have already been previously developed in the Old Testament. And that's where we're going to spend a lot of time looking for them. The Old Testament is the key. I believe that one of the reasons why we struggle with interpreting Revelation often is that we do not have enough understanding of the Old Testament. Another problem we will run into is that the Old Testament scripture used elsewhere in the Bible is not always directly quoted. In other words, a lot of times New Testament authors don't quote an entire verse or entire passage. Sometimes they just allude to those passages because they are figuring that the person that is reading their works is already familiar with what came before in the book. I'm going to give you kind of a comedic example. And a few of you have heard this before, but I don't know if everybody has, so I'm going to tell it again. A comedian invited one of his good friends to a comic convention. After the sessions were over, they went to a banquet, and they're sitting there eating, and someone yells out, 54, and everybody starts laughing, except the friend of the comedian. A few minutes later, somebody hollers, 127, and the whole auditorium bursts out belly laughing. Both times, the comedian's friends just sat there wondering what was going on. So he asked his friend, the comic, what am I missing? Oh, everyone here knows all of these jokes so well that all they have to do is mention the book that all these jokes are in, and they've got them all memorized. So as soon as someone says a number, they know which joke it is, and they just start laughing, knowing what that joke, how it was said by that person and everything. So the friend says, tell me a good joke. And let me yell out the number. And so he says, use 99. That's the best joke in the book. It always gets a laugh. So the guy takes a deep breath and he yells, 99. Nothing. The guy says, what happened? He says, well, some people can tell a joke and some people can't. Paul and Peter and the gospel writers, all of them knew the Old Testament scriptures like the back of their hand, and they expected that those who were reading their letters and their works would have already read the beginning of the book. In other words, they figured that those who would read what they wrote would already be proficient in Moses and the prophets. They were kind of prereqs. So they didn't always directly quote. If you guys were in my, some of you were, if you guys were in my brother's Hebrews class a few years ago, he brought that out very, very well. The New Testament is peppered with Old Testament references. We don't always recognize them because they're not direct quotes. Therefore, the New Testament writers needed to refer, when the New Testament writers needed to refer to something in the Old Testament, which they often do to support what they were teaching, they did not feel the need to quote the whole verse or passage every time. Instead, they made enough of an allusion to the Old Testament as they thought was needed in order to make their point. I have a book at home. I have not read this book cover to cover. It's not actually meant to be read, and the other reason is it's 1,200 pages long. It cross-references every known use of the Old Testament by New Testament writers. 1,200 pages worth. The writers of the New Testament constantly alluded to the Old Testament over and over again. Unfortunately, we do not always recognize when they are doing so. Where am I at? All right, one more, and then we're going to be done. We got time. One more problem that I want to note, and then we're going to go through some other stuff as we go through the book, but I want to mention this before we get there too. One problem with interpreting Revelation is understanding its time frame. Revelation is not a book that is written in a usual, what we would refer to a usual chronological sequence. So in other words, this is not the way Revelation is written, where you got the 7 seals, then this, and this, and it goes chronologically through time, going from maybe when Jesus resurrected until the end of time. It's not written that way. And if we have that idea, we are going to misinterpret it right from the get-go. I want you to watch this. This is more along the lines of what it's written like, okay? And we're gonna talk about this a lot as we do it. But each of these visions kind of had the same starting point and the same ending point, and they talk about the same period of time. All right, I want you to watch this next little clip I've got. There's a current movie that's kind of an example of this kind of storytelling. It's the movie Dunkirk, as you can see up there. Dunkirk is told from 3 very different perspectives, all taking place in the same proximity at the same time, yet all showing a different side of what is actually happening. This is about a minute long or so, and this is somebody telling about that, all right? So hopefully you can hear this.
Number 7, Dunkirk. With Dunkirk, virtuosic director Christopher Nolan tried his hand at a World War II drama. And this being Nolan, he had to make it as inventive and elaborate as he possibly could. To do this, he decided to tell the story through multiple perspectives and time periods. The story is told through 3 points of view.
This one. He's a German spy. Don't be daft.
There's Tommy's, a soldier awaiting evacuation. Dawson, a civilian sailor who rides his personal boat into Dunkirk.
You should be at home!
Well, there won't be any home if we allow a slaughter across the channel.
And Farrier, a Spitfire pilot tasked with defending the evacuation. The stories are also told in different time spans.
Oh, she's turning. You must have damaged her. Where's the escort? I got one.
Tommy's story takes place over 1 week, Dawson's in 1 day, and Farrier's in just 1 hour before they finally intersect at the oil blast rescue and the evacuation of Dunkirk.
All right. That's all I got to say today. Next week we're going to start in with Revelation itself, Any questions or comments? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying thank you. Appreciate